In 1987, a newborn baby was taken from her hospital bassinet just hours after birth. No witnesses, no footage, no trace. For 25 years, her parents searched. The world moved on. The case went cold. But then, one ordinary DNA test unraveled everything. Before we start, please help me get to 1,000 subscribers. And right where are you watching this video from? It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. On a warm July morning in 1987, Diana and Mark Whitmore walked into the modest maternity ward of Rose Lake Regional Hospital, a quiet brick building nestled in the hills of rural North Carolina. Their first child, a baby girl they'd waited years for, had just arrived. They named her Anna Grace. The delivery had gone smoothly. Nurses smiled. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender soap. Diana, exhausted but glowing, cradled the newborn in her arms while Mark gently brushed a fingertip across his daughter's cheek. They had brought a tiny yellow onesie, soft blankets, a hand-knit hat. Mark even took a Polaroid. Diana laughing, eyes still glassy with emotion, the baby nestled in her arms. They pinned it on the wall of the hospital room. Everything felt real, whole, complete, until the next morning. The nurse's shift had changed around 6 a.m. Diana was groggy from the medication, half asleep when a soft voice whispered, "Just taking her for routine tests." It wasn't unusual. Newborns were regularly wheeled out and back again. She nodded, barely opening her eyes. That was the last time she saw her daughter. An hour passed, then 2. At first, Diana assumed there'd been a delay. Maybe the nursery was full. Maybe the tests took longer than expected. She rang the call button. A nurse arrived. Not the same one. "Your baby?" she asked, confused. "We don't have her." The room grew still. Mark returned from grabbing coffee, just as nurses began hurrying into the hallway. A supervisor was called. Security followed. Then, the police. The bassinet was empty. Rose Lake Regional Hospital went into lockdown. Officers checked exits, stairwells, parking lots, every corner of the maternity wing. But there were no signs of forced entry. No alarms had been triggered. No footage captured anyone carrying a child. In 1987, small-town hospitals didn't yet have modern surveillance systems or strict nursery access controls. In their first press briefing, hospital administrators called it a tragic procedural oversight, a security lapse. They said they were fully cooperating with investigators. But that did little to calm Diana and Mark. The detectives interviewed everyone. Nurses, janitors, patients. They issued bulletins across the state, tapped nearby bus terminals and highway patrol. For days, helicopters scanned the woods surrounding Rose Lake. But no blanket was found. No bassinet. No baby. Months passed. Then years. The case faded from headlines. No suspects. No eyewitnesses. No answers. The hospital quietly updated its security systems and changed staff. But Diana and Mark never gave up. They kept Anna Grace's room exactly as it was. White crib, painted walls, soft stars on the ceiling. A small lamp glowed in the corner every night, just in case. For years, they kept her room ready. But no one ever walked through the door. The world moved on. But Diana and Mark Whitmore didn't. From 1988 through the early 90s, their lives were no longer measured in seasons or milestones, but in searches, tips, and the painful ticking of a clock that never struck home. Every morning began with the same ritual. Diana checked the answering machine. Mark scanned the newspaper. Hope was no longer a feeling. It had become a practice. In the first year, they did everything the experts told them to. They went on local television, clutching the same Polaroid from the hospital. They gave interviews, appeared on regional news broadcasts. "We just want her back," Mark said once, his voice cracking mid-sentence. Diana carried a zippered leather binder wherever she went, filled with flyers, case summaries, photos of baby Anna. If a girl looked to be the right age, had the right hair, or the right shape of nose, Diana would quietly compare. She never asked aloud, just stared a little longer than she should have. They hired private investigators. More than one. Some vanished after taking the retainer fee. Others tried, then walked away with tired eyes and no leads. No one ever said it to their faces, but the message was clear. The trail is cold. You have to let her go. But they didn't. They kept celebrating Anna Grace's birthday every July 11th. The first year, They bought a pink frosted cupcake. The second, a stuffed bear they placed on her untouched crib. By year 5, the tradition was a quiet dinner, a candle lit on the windowsill. Diana never missed it. Not once. In 1992, they moved into a new home across town. A smaller place. Less echo. More manageable. But they left one thing unchanged: the phone number. It was still the same landline they'd given the police that first day in 1987. In case she calls, Diana once told a reporter, softly, she might not remember much, but maybe she'll remember our name. By 1995, the story had become a footnote, the kind of mystery people remembered only when similar cases surfaced. New parents installed baby monitors. Hospitals upgraded protocols. But for the Whitmores, the memory wasn't cautionary. It was personal. Their daughter wasn't cased. She was still out there, somewhere. And Diana never stopped collecting. She kept a scrapbook inside a blue box on the top shelf of the bedroom closet. Inside were photos from crowds, school portraits clipped from newspapers, news reports of found children. Each page labeled with a sticky note. Age 7. Eyes like Mark. Atlanta sighting, maybe. To anyone else, it looked like desperation. To her, it was the closest thing to motherhood she had left. 300 miles away from the Whitmores' grief, in a quiet Charleston neighborhood lined with crepe myrtles and shuttered porches, a little girl named Emily Shaw was growing up under a different kind of silence. Emily lived in a small duplex near the edge of town with her mother, Linda, a quiet woman with tired eyes and a voice that rarely rose above a whisper. To the neighbors, they looked like any other modest family. No drama, no noise. Linda worked odd jobs, mostly in home care, sometimes in a nearby clinic. Emily went to school, did her homework, played with neighborhood kids. But something always fell off. There were no baby pictures, no ultrasound photos on the fridge, no framed snapshots of her first steps, not even a hospital bracelet tucked away in a keepsake drawer. Emily noticed early on. While her friends flipped through family albums filled with fuzzy newborn shots and birthday candles, her own childhood seemed to begin at age 3. A picture of her in a swing, smiling awkwardly at someone off camera. It was the earliest one Linda ever showed her. "Where are the ones from when I was born?" Emily asked once. Linda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You were a gift," she said softly. "You came to me when I needed you most." Emily never understood what that meant. Their home was simple, but safe. Linda cooked dinner every night. She taught Emily how to sew a button and balance a checkbook. But she was always guarded, always watching. Phone calls were rare. They never stayed long when visiting stores. Linda didn't like crowds or questions. And she never, ever, spoke about Emily's birth. "I just want to know where I'm from," Emily once said when she was 9. Linda's tone shifted in an instant. "You're from me," she said. "And that's all that matters." At school, Emily blended in well enough. She was smart, polite, even quiet like her mother. But she noticed the gaps. No birth certificate on file, just a delayed registration letter from another state. No family listed except Linda. No medical records before kindergarten. When asked about her father, Linda would say the same thing each time. "He's not important. We don't talk about him." By the time Emily was 12, her questions had grown sharper. Why did they move so often? Why was their mailbox under a different name? Why did Linda keep a suitcase packed in the closet, just in case? And most of all, why did she feel like her life began halfway through the story? By the time Emily turned 16, the quiet questions she'd tucked away for years began to rise to the surface, sharper, louder, impossible to ignore. It started with something simple, a school project. Her history teacher assigned a class, a personal genealogy exercise, build a family tree, trace relatives, document origins. For most of her classmates, it was fun. Some brought in old photo albums. Others interviewed grandparents. Emily sat in silence with a blank sheet. She knew better than to ask Linda directly. But that night at dinner, she tried anyway. "Do you know what hospital I was born in?" she asked casually. Linda barely looked up from her plate. "You were born in Virginia. A small clinic. Doesn't exist anymore." That was all she said. No city. No doctor. No story. A few weeks later, Emily tried to apply for a passport. She had dreams of going abroad with her class the following summer. But when the clerk reviewed her paperwork, they paused. "I'm sorry," they said. "We can't process this." Emily blinked. "Why?" There's a problem with your documentation. Your birth record doesn't match any issued certificate on file. The clerk was polite but firm. You'll need your original birth registration. This one's incomplete. That night, Emily lay awake, the ceiling fan spinning above her in slow circles. She thought about the little things. The suitcase always packed, the way Linda double-locked the door at night, the hushed tone in her voice any time the past came up. What was she hiding? A week later, when Linda left for a weekend caregiver job in Beaufort, Emily made a decision. She went into her mother's closet. She didn't know what she was looking for. Maybe just something real, something with her name on it, some proof she belonged to the story she'd been told. Instead, she found a shoebox, taped shut, tucked behind a stack of folded blankets. Inside were old papers, a faded envelope, a worn-out photo of Linda looking much younger, standing in front of a brick building she didn't recognize. And near the bottom, a hospital bracelet. It was small, designed for a newborn wrist, and it didn't have her name on it. The tag read, Anna Grace Whitmore, DOB, 07/11/1987. Emily stared at it, her breath catching in her chest. It wasn't a nickname, It wasn't even close. It was a different identity, a different story, a different life. She sat down on the edge of the bed, the bracelet cold in her palm. Who was Anna Grace Whitmore? And what was her name doing in a box in their house? Emily didn't sleep that night. The hospital bracelet sat on her nightstand, lit faintly by the glow of a desk lamp she never turned off. The name, Anna Grace Whitmore, echoed louder the longer she looked at it. By morning, she had made up her mind. When Linda came home the next evening, tired from her overnight shift, Emily waited until she had put down her purse and kicked off her shoes. I found something, Emily said quietly. In your closet. Linda froze mid-step. Emily held up the bracelet, her voice trembling but steady. Who is Anna Grace Whitmore? For a moment, her mother said nothing. Then, Linda's expression shifted, a strange mix of guilt and defense. She was a baby I cared for, she said too quickly. I kept a few things. That's all. Emily narrowed her eyes. You told me I was born in Virginia. This bracelet says North Carolina. Why is there no record of me until I was 3? Linda didn't answer. Instead, she walked into the kitchen, hands trembling slightly as she filled a glass of water. The rest of that evening passed in near silence. But something had broken, and both of them felt it. Over the next few weeks, Linda became more withdrawn, paranoid. She began locking her bedroom. She shut down any conversation that even hinted at Emily's past. You're mine, she snapped once, almost out of nowhere. That's all you need to know. But Emily couldn't let it go. In secret, she began searching. Late at night, under the covers with her laptop, she scoured news archives, public databases, and forums for missing children. She started with the basics. Missing infants, hospital disappearances, late 1980s, North Carolina. Most pages led nowhere. Some stories were too vague, others too old. But one night, buried in a forgotten blog linked to a missing persons group, she found something. A post dated 2012. It featured a family photo, a plea from 2 aging parents, and a digitally aged rendering of a child who had vanished from Rose Lake Regional Hospital in 1987. The baby's name? Anna Grace Whitmore. Emily didn't tell anyone what she was about to do. Not her friends, not her guidance counselor, and certainly not Linda. One quiet afternoon, while her mother napped on the couch, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as the cursor blinked in the search bar. At-home DNA test kit. She picked one of the larger companies, the kind people used to learn about their ancestry or find long-lost relatives. For Emily, it wasn't about curiosity, it was about truth. She filled in the shipping information, added a prepaid return label, and used a gift card she'd been saving for college supplies to cover the cost. The confirmation email came 30 seconds later. Your kit is on its way. It arrived in a plain, nondescript envelope 5 days later. Just a simple box with swabs and instructions. She followed them carefully, sealed the tube, dropped it off at a mailbox the next morning before school. Then came the hardest part, waiting. Days turned into weeks. She couldn't concentrate. Her grades slipped. She barely spoke during dinner. At night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, imagining every possible outcome. What if it was a mistake? What if she was wrong? What if she was right? She checked her email every hour. Until finally, one afternoon in biology class, the subject line appeared. Your DNA results are ready. She waited until she was alone. Sitting cross-legged on her bed, heart hammering, she opened the link and logged in. The screen loaded slowly. Then it appeared. A digital tree, colored lines, circles connected by thin threads. At the top of the page, her name, Emily Shaw. But just beneath it, under close family matches, were two names she had never seen before. Diana Whitmore, Mark Whitmore. And next to each name, a bold label. Parent, verified. Emily blinked. The screen seemed to pulse. She scrolled down, searching for Linda's name, the only family she had ever known. Nothing. No match. No share markers. No cousins. No distant ties. Zero genetic connection. She clicked on Diana's profile. Age range. Location. North Carolina. Same town where the baby had disappeared in 1987. Then she clicked on Mark. Same markers. Same region. A mirror image of the girl in the age-progressed photo she couldn't unsee. It didn't matter how much she wanted to doubt it. The truth was right there in her DNA. Linda Shaw was not her mother. But Diana and Mark Whitmore, they were. It had been years since Diana Whitmore had logged into her DNA profile. She created the account long ago, back when hope still had form. Back when someone at the Missing Children Network told her, gently, that DNA might be their only real chance. At the time, it had felt like planting a message in a bottle and tossing it into the ocean. For years, nothing had come back. Until now. She was folding laundry in the living room when the email arrived. You have a new close family match. Diana opened it without thinking, expecting a distant cousin or a duplicate result. But the name that appeared on the screen stopped her cold. Emily Shaw. Parent match. 99% confidence. Her vision blurred. The laundry slipped from her hands. She read the name again. Mark, she called, her voice barely above a whisper. He came in, towel draped over his shoulder. What is it? She turned the screen toward him, her fingers trembling. He read it once, then twice, then a third time. No, he said softly. That can't be. They sat in silence for nearly an hour. They didn't cry. Not yet. It felt too fragile to believe, too big to hold all at once. Diana pulled out the photo again, the one they had aged digitally each year, her little girl becoming a teenager, then a woman. A face she had memorized, dreamed of, whispered to on quiet nights when the house felt too empty. The resemblance to the DNA match was unmistakable. Same brow line, same mouth, same soul in the eyes. It was her. There was a button on the screen, request to connect. Diana hovered over it, then clicked. She typed one sentence. I believe we may be connected in a way that matters deeply. I'm here if you want to talk. Emily responded 2 hours later. It was short, careful, but open. She agreed to a phone call. Diana answered on the first ring. There was a pause, long and heavy, as if both sides of the call knew that words would never be enough. Then, from the other end, a voice. I think. I'm your daughter. Diana closed her eyes, hand over her mouth. I think you are too, she whispered back. The call lasted 40 minutes. Emily explained everything. The bracelet, the lies, the test. Her voice shook but never broke. Diana listened in silence, every instinct inside her fighting to not reach through the phone and hold her. Mark sat beside her the whole time, staring at the wall, not saying a word, just listening. When the call ended, Diana didn't move. She simply repeated one sentence, over and over, barely audible. She's alive. She's alive. She's alive. The first meeting happened in the quiet lobby of a family services office in Charlotte. Neutral ground, neutral lighting, but nothing could soften the weight of the moment. Emily stood face to face with Diana and Mark Whitmore. No one rushed in with hugs. No dramatic reunions. Just a long, silent gaze. Three people trying to find each other in the lines of unfamiliar faces that somehow felt like home. Mark's voice cracked first. You look just like her. Diana stepped forward, slowly, as if any sudden movement might cause the moment to vanish. I never stopped hoping, she said. Emily didn't speak. She simply nodded, eyes shimmering, and let her hand rest for just a second on Diana's. It wasn't an ending. It wasn't a beginning. It was something in between, surreal, cautious, and very, very real. Word spread quickly. A match had been made, not just through DNA, but through documents, timelines, and a paper trail that had finally intersected after 25 years. The case of Anna Grace Whitmore, missing since July 19, 1987, was officially reopened. Agent Raina Leeds had seen a lot in her 15 years with the Bureau. Cold cases, missing persons, long-forgotten files that suddenly roared back to life. But few were like this. The Whitmore case wasn't just a mystery. It was a wound, left open for 25 years, barely acknowledged, barely investigated. Now, thanks to a DNA result and one determined young woman, the past was knocking again. And this time, Raina intended to answer. The first thing she did was dig into Linda Shaw's trail, if that was even a real name. Within days, Raina uncovered 4 separate identities spanning across 3 states. Asterisk Lenora Shea, employed briefly at a clinic in Georgia in 1986. Asterisk Linda Shore, listed as a caregiver on a private agency roster in South Carolina. Asterisk L. Shea, volunteer coordinator at a church-run hospice in Alabama. Asterisk, and finally, Linda Shaw, a single mother who appeared in Charleston in mid-1987 with a young child and no birth documentation. Each record was thin, fragmented. None of the facilities had kept full employment logs. Most of the places were small, rural, and under-resourced. But the dates were consistent. The pattern was clear. She moved often, quickly, quietly. Raina contacted Rose Lake Regional Hospital once more. She'd already scoured the official staff logs from 1987. No Linda Shaw, no similar aliases. But then she asked about visiting staff, people who might have been present unofficially, even for just a day. One nurse, now retired, remembered something odd. There was a woman who came by that week. Said she was observing for a transfer from another hospital. Wore a white coat. Introduced herself as a float nurse from Georgia. The name. She thought it was L. Scholl, or maybe Lena Shaw. She couldn't be sure, but she remembered this. She didn't sign in. Said she'd just speak to one of the floor supervisors. But something about her didn't sit right. She didn't ask many questions. Just watched. That visit occurred on July 10th, the day before Anna Grace disappeared. Raina returned to town records, checked real estate filings, utility account setups, anything that might place Linda Shaw, or any of her aliases, in the area during that time. And then it surfaced. A change of address form filed under the name Linda Shore, dated July 13th, 1987. Just 2 days after the abduction, she had moved across state lines to Charleston. No forwarding details. Just a post office box and a rental agreement for a duplex on the outskirts of town. The halls of Rose Lake Regional Hospital had changed in the 25 years since Anna Grace Whitmore vanished. New paint, new security systems, new staff. But the memories buried in those walls hadn't moved an inch. Agent Raina Leeds had nearly exhausted every paper trail. The logs, the name changes, the relocations, all of it painted a picture of a woman living behind masks. But what Raina needed now was something more human. Something someone remembered. And she found it in Marilyn Dorsey, a retired night nurse who worked the maternity wing in the summer of 1987. Marilyn lived in a quiet apartment just outside Winston-Salem, surrounded by stacks of knitting projects and a small dog named Percy. Her memory was sharp, her voice firm. When Raina showed her an old black-and-white photo of Linda Shaw, taken from a DMV record in the early 90s, Marilyn leaned in and squinted. "I've seen her before," she said. "Here at Rose Lake." Marilyn nodded. "Not as staff. She wasn't on the roster. But I remember her standing outside the nursery window one night. Had a badge. Said she was shadowing a nurse from another hospital. Didn't introduce herself to anyone. Just stood there, watching." Raina felt a chill settle in the room. "Do you remember what night that was?" Marilyn took a long breath. "Night of July 10th. The night before the baby went missing." Marilyn's recollection was detailed, enough for a forensic sketch artist to produce a rendering of the mystery woman she saw that night. The result, a soft-featured woman in her early 30s with large eyes and hair pulled tightly back. Plain, unassuming, placed beside a younger photo of Linda Shaw, nearly identical. Raina stared at the sketch for a long time. She didn't sign in. She didn't ask questions. She just watched. A week later, The final piece fell into place. The DNA results from the Federal Registry confirmed what everyone already suspected. Emily Shaw was, without question, Anna Grace Whitmore. The match was absolute. Two genetic parents. A perfect profile. The case, from a scientific standpoint, was now closed. But the mystery wasn't. How had Linda gotten into the hospital that night? There were no fingerprints. No camera footage, not uncommon for the time. No badge logs. No nurse who recalled directly interacting with her. She hadn't just walked in. She had blended in, as someone helpful, familiar, ordinary. Then, sometime in the early morning hours, she had left, carrying a newborn child who would disappear from the world for 25 years. Raina added one more note to her case file. She planned it. She waited. She watched. And somehow, she walked right out. The how may never be answered. But the who? That was finally known. They found her in a small town near the Georgia border, living under yet another name, Margaret Lane, according to the lease. The house was plain and quiet. One story, overgrown yard, a faded porch swing that hadn't moved in years. Linda Shaw, now in her early 60s, opened the door herself when the agents arrived. No panic, no confusion, just a woman who seemed to know this moment had been waiting for her. Agent Raina Lead stood at the threshold, badge in hand. "We need to speak with you," she said. Linda nodded slowly, then stepped aside. Inside, the home was sparse. No photos, no mementos, just the gentle ticking of a clock on the kitchen wall and a teapot left warming on the stove. She sat down without being asked. "I figured it would catch up to me one day," she said quietly. But she didn't confess, not fully, not directly, and that made everything more complicated. Emily didn't go with the agents. She waited in a borrowed car, parked across the street, watching through the windshield as the woman who raised her, lied to her, sat inside the house, framed by old curtains and soft lamplight. She hadn't come for justice. Not really. What she wanted was truth. But truth, as it turned out, had its limits. At the county office, the district attorney reviewed the case with great care. Yes, the DNA confirmed Emily's identity. Yes, the timeline matched. Yes, the name changes, the suspicious moves, the unregistered appearances. All of it pointed to Linda Shaw. But there were problems. There was no surveillance footage. No witnesses who saw the baby taken. No confession. And most importantly, the statute of limitations for nonviolent parental abduction in 1987 had long expired. It was infuriating, but it was also the law. Raina delivered the news to Emily personally. "There won't be an arrest," she said. "Not because you weren't wronged, but because the law was written before people imagined something like this could go unanswered for so long." Emily nodded. She had already suspected as much. The last time they saw each other was in a small, windowless interview room. Emily sat across from Linda, her hands folded, her face unreadable. "Why?" she asked. Linda stared at her lap for a long time. Then, in a voice that was barely more than a breath, she said, "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted someone to love." There were no follow-up questions. No dramatic goodbye. Emily stood, thanked her quietly, and walked out. The hardest part wasn't learning the truth. It was learning where to start again. After the dust settled, after the interviews, the headlines, the meetings with lawyers and therapists, Emily Whitmore stood in the middle of two worlds, one that raised her in secrets and one that had waited for her in silence. And now, she had to choose how to move forward. The first time she visited the Whitmore's home, the air felt heavy with memory. The walls were lined with photos of birthdays and graduations, but none of her. A room had been kept for her once, Diana said, softly. But it was long gone now. Life had demanded change. Still, they welcomed her gently, patiently. There were awkward pauses, long silences, unfinished thoughts, but also warmth. Diana showed her baby shoes she had never worn. Mark grilled too much food and pretended not to stare at her when she smiled. They didn't try to make up for the past. They just tried to be present in the now. The first holiday together was Thanksgiving. Emily stood at the table, surrounded by strangers who felt a little more familiar with every passing hour. She listened to stories about her, a baby with wild curls, a cry that echoed, a name chosen months before she was born. She didn't know how to respond, but she smiled, and they understood. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. Emily didn't need one to know who it was from. Inside was a handwritten note in Linda's careful, slanted handwriting. No apology. No denial. Just a page of memories. You love climbing trees, da. You used to hum yourself to sleep, da. You once asked if we could move closer to the ocean so you could listen to it every night. Near the end, one line stood out. I know I didn't deserve you, but I never stopped loving you. There was no signature, just the empty space at the bottom of the page. Emily didn't write back. She folded the letter neatly and placed it in a small wooden box, next to the hospital bracelet she had once found in the back of a closet. Two artifacts from two separate lives. Neither one could fully explain her story, but both had shaped it. The microphone felt heavier than expected. The community center wasn't full, just a modest room with folding chairs and a few dozen people. Some curious, some grieving their own losses, some just needing to hear what survival sounded like. Emily Whitmore stood at the front, hands clasped together, eyes steady. It was the first time she'd shared her story publicly. She didn't read from a script. She just spoke. I didn't grow up knowing I was missing, she began, voice quiet but sure. I didn't know my name wasn't mine, or that somewhere out there, a whole family had been holding on to a picture of me, hoping, waiting. She glanced at Diana and Mark in the front row. Their faces were still and wet with quiet tears. I used to think identity came from paperwork, birth certificates, photos, but it doesn't. It comes from knowing who you are when the world tries to tell you otherwise. She paused, exhaled, and continued. Yes, I was taken, Doc, but I'm not gone, Doc. I'm here, and I'm still becoming who I was meant to be. Later that evening, back at the Whitmore home, Diana stood at the fireplace mantel, rearranging what she once feared she'd never get to. On one side sat the original baby photo from the hospital, the only image they had of Anna Grace. Soft cheeks, newborn eyes, and beside it, a new photo. Emily, 25, standing with both parents, half smiling, her head slightly tilted like it always had been, just like in the aged rendering they clung to for years. Two versions of the same child, finally reunited. Mark walked over and rested a hand on Diana's shoulder. She's really here, he whispered. Diana nodded. After all this time, she said, she found her way back. As the night settled over their home and the house grew quiet again, a small light remained on in Emily's room, just enough to read by. Beside her bed was a wooden box filled with pieces of her story, a bracelet, a letter, a birthday card, two photos. One old, one new. Not everything made sense yet. Maybe it never would. But that was okay. She wasn't lost anymore.